January 29th, 2022. Police, emergency vehicles, first responders, and 3 civilian women were all on the scene. On the front lawn of that home, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, partially buried in the snow, frozen and lifeless. It was the scene of a tragic death, and prosecutors say it was murder. They say John's girlfriend, Karen Reed, who found his body in the snow, ran him over the night before and left him there to die. But why would she do it? What was going on in their relationship, and what happened the night before? Prosecutors have produced a series of text messages between John and Karen, and we'll take a close look at them as we analyze the state of their relationship. Was there any indication something was wrong, or any motive for murder? Then we'll return to the scene of the crime and examine the photographs being used as evidence. What do they show? What do they prove? We'll bring in our experts as we continue our investigation into the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And a big question in this case is, what was going on between Karen and John? What was really happening here? This is a pair that had been together for a couple, and now one's accused of murdering the other. So if you have a case where people are together and sharing a lot of time and sharing their lives together, the jury's going to want to know, well, why would she do it? Which gets us to the motive. But to understand if a motive exists, you got to understand what was really happening here. So how does the jury get an idea of what's going on with this couple? Because many times couples will not make their issues or whatever's going on in their relationship very public, right? They're not going to do it out in front of other people necessarily. There may be times, there may be some moments, but to really get the insight, you need to understand how they're communicating with each other. So private text messages, a great way to get inside their minds, get inside their relationship, to understand how they are communicating. And in this case, there are a lot of text messages. I mean, Karen was sending a lot of text messages to John. John's responding, sometimes not responding. But the bottom line, they are communicating that day, in the day leading up to the night when John O'Keefe ends up somehow, some way on that front lawn in the snow. Now, prosecutors are saying murder. They're saying Karen Reed is responsible for doing it. So it's going to be important and significant to go through those text messages, understand what they say, maybe read between the lines. And that's part of what we're going to do this hour on this program, bringing in our experts. We're also going to try to figure out, was there really a motive in this case? Was the state of this relationship at such a place that Karen Reed would want to kill John O'Keefe? It keeps coming back to that because that is what the charges are here. Murder. That she did it on purpose. Now, we're going to get to those text messages in just a moment, but court was in session today. The jury not there, but the lawyers were, the judge was, and so was Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, and he has more for us tonight.
Hey, Vinny, today we got a glimpse into the defense case, which could start later this week, as 3 expert witnesses were questioned outside of the presence of the jury.
Were you able to confidently come to any conclusions or opinions about the nature of the injuries suffered by John O'Keefe, specifically as they relate to John O'Keefe's right arm?
Yes.
What is your opinion and conclusion concerning those injuries?
Those injuries appear to be consistent with an animal attack.
Can you be more specific in terms of the type of animal, or are you relegated to simply an animal attack?
Well, they are consistent with a large dog attack. There's a combination of both what I consider bite wounds and scratch wounds on the arm. There were also some puncture wounds in that shirt.
Dr. Marie Russell, a retired ER doctor, published opinions about dog bite injuries and concluded that injuries to John O'Keefe's arm are consistent with a dog bite. However, the jury might not ever hear her testimony because she was added to the defense witness list after the discovery deadline. A judge will decide on Thursday if she can testify at all. Here's what defense attorney Alan Jackson told us outside the courthouse.
I would love to have her because I think she's relevant and she's salient, but we have other medical professionals who are going to testify along the same lines. So I'm not overly concerned about. I don't think that we will lose her. I think the scope of her testimony might be a little bit limited.
The other two witnesses to be questioned were crash reconstructionists who were initially hired for the federal investigation into the case.
A lot of times we'll utilize the crash test dummy where we'll set it up and we'll actually have it struck by different vehicles or different objects to look at the response of the body.
The agency that hired you, were you asked to answer a specific question, or were you asked to just do an analysis based on what we sent you, or how was that put to you as far as what you were doing?
There was a specific request that we were asked to perform and to evaluate in this case.
And specifically what I'm asking, sir, is there's an analysis in there of whether or not the injuries to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head could have been caused from contact with the vehicle, correct?
That is part of my analysis and opinions, yes, sir.
What were you tasked to do specifically?
So specifically overall, I was tasked from the biomechanical standpoint to determine or see if it's possible to determine how the injuries in this case occurred. And part of that was determine whether the injuries, the head injury and the arm injuries resulted from contact with the Lexus in this case.
On Thursday, Judge Cannoni will also decide the scope of their testimony. Once again, outside the courthouse, we met up with Karen Reed, and here's what she said about the case against her so far.
There is no case against me.
After 8 weeks.
After 8 weeks, it's smoke and mirrors, and it's going through my private life and trying to contrive a motive that was never there.
Have you thought about what it would be like to be on the witness stand yourself?
Yeah, I have. I'd like to fill in some holes and correct some lies, but it's up to the attorneys, and they'll make the call probably at the 11th hour, and I'm there or not there.
You're lobbying, though, for your chance to testify?
I'm an outspoken person, and I've never not been able to speak up for myself and my defense, except when it matters the most. I've got to rely on them and their expertise, and I'll defer to the attorneys.
And court is dark tomorrow. The state could rest their case in chief as early as Thursday. That's the very latest from Dedham. I'll send it back to you, Vinny.
Matt Johnson in the middle of it all, and you can see that the defense is lining up their case and lining up their experts that they are going to call. Well, we're going to do the same thing tonight. I'm going to line up my experts as we go through some of those text messages. Joining me, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. Also with us, a psychotherapist and CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. Welcome to you both. Great to have you here. I have a whole series of these exchanges, these text message exchanges between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. These are all in the day leading up. So let's start this is January 28th, 2:33 in the afternoon. Karen, so you're not into this anymore? John, not into fighting all the time, correct. Karen, if you tell me you're interested in someone else, you will never hear from me again. You can have all the space in the world. 234, John, unknown content. 234, Karen, then stop starting with me. John, I am not answering. Stop calling. 234, Karen, can you please answer after how you treated me earlier? 235, John, redacted, is right here. 235, Karen, you start a rager with me out of nowhere, then tell me you're sick of fighting with me. All right. Dr. Carol Lieberman, this is, referencing something happened in the morning, and now things are starting to develop here. What are you hearing in this relationship?
Well, the summary of it is, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. What is happening is, to me, it seems this is like a typical example of couples when a man starts pulling away, and it seems like John was already telling her, that he was not so interested in the relationship anymore. I mean, for example, his niece and nephew say that he asked her to leave his home several times, and she said no, she wouldn't leave. When she makes a reference here to his saying I'll give you all the space you need, makes it clear that he must have been asking her for space. I mean, this is after this event in Aruba where she thought he was flirting with someone. And then these 2 weeks before the incident, before he was killed, that is when things got worse and worse. So, this is typical of what women do. Unfortunately, it never works. But when a man starts pulling away, a lot of times women will just keep pushing, keep trying to get proof. Oh, well, you're not really going to leave me, and then the man, when he doesn't give proof, like for example, even just from the beginning when he says, she says, so you're not into this anymore. And he says, not into fighting all the time, correct. And then it gets even more distant. So she keeps getting more and more frustrated and fearful that the relationship is going to end, and more angry. I mean, more filled with rage. These texts are really very damning.
Now, the next one, this is at 2:38. Now, we just finished at 2:35 there. 2:38, Karen says, I'm going to grab a drink in a bit. Karen again at 2:38. Can you please answer? John, no, Karen. Not sure why you need to announce that you're grabbing a drink, but have fun. Then 1 minute later, Karen, seeing if you want to meet me later. So at this point, Dr. Janie Lacey, where is this now starting to go here? What do you think each side is attempting to do in this exchange?
Well, when we hear this exchange, Vinny, we know that they had a toxic relationship, because what we're hearing in these text messages are the hallmarks of a toxic relationship. We're hearing their conflict, and then we're hearing control, and then we're also hearing the competition. When we hear the competition, because now that she's saying she's going to get a drink, obviously she's saying this in some potential manipulative fashion to get some type of reaction from him. And then the control, the constant desperation that we're hearing from her when someone starts calling someone and they don't want to obviously speak to you, but you continuously call them and then asking them to answer. It's because you want to keep that conflict going. So we're hearing those hallmarks. So there's probably a lot more history here that's bringing them to this moment. And just as I heard my colleague mention, when we have either party, in this case the female, who feels desperation and then trying to make all these attempts to try to create some type of competition because they're trying to use some type of manipulative tactic to make the person answer, come to them, respond to them, and trying all these types of tactics, which obviously, agreed, never works.
So let me go to the next one, and then I think I want to hear from both of you on this one. This is now at 3:40, about an hour later. Karen, okay, well, after how this morning went down, I don't think I need to be back over there with you, frustrated at how I am with these kids. Has nothing to do with drinking. 3:40, Karen, I am paranoid now that everything I do with them is problematic. So rather see you for a minute without the kids around. So it seems from this, Dr. Carol Lieberman, something happened with the children in the morning that was the genesis of this conflict, and now Karen is trying to, I guess, be alone with John at this moment. Where do you think they are in this relationship? Do they want to be together? And if they don't want to be together, why couldn't they just be apart?
Well, I think the problem is that she wants to still be together and he doesn't. He's had enough of this. Maybe part of it had to do with her wanting to have more time with him alone, rather than having the kids around too. That isn't very intimate, isn't very sexy. Perhaps it seems like he was criticizing how she was with the kids, doing something with the kids, but the kids, are really, because they have said that that was really rocky, especially in the 2 weeks before the incident, that they're not helping her side, helping her defense at all. Their comments seem to support the fact that he really didn't want her there anymore. You know, she's not getting the hint. He kept telling her to leave the home, and she's not leaving. And now she's saying all these things to try to entice him to be with her again. Even now, get a drink. You know, all these things that he's not feeding into it. He's not giving her the answer she wants.
And how about the dynamic here, Dr. Janie Lacey? You've got they're not married, but they've been spending a lot of time together. She's spending a good portion of the week at his place, and he's raising these two children. So how about that dynamic and how it plays in their relationship?
Well, even though they're not married, we can assume that they had attachment. They had, these ways of which they related to each other, some familiarity, some habits, all these types of things. So what I'm hearing with these children is that he probably did give her some feedback on what he probably needed or how she was around these children, which would be a good thing in a couple's relationship, especially when there's kids involved, to give someone else a feedback in the privacy of how they're showing up in that space. So for her to try to get that away, to get the kids away, would probably be more trying to convince and more trying to probably persuade his perception of her and whatever she was trying to achieve, and that's probably not lose the relationship. And this is a good case where when you are leaving a relationship, you have to make it very clear and very plain when you don't want to be with someone, because sometimes when there's this attachment and connection with each other, there can be these opportunities where people can still try to get in there and make something happen when obviously he probably didn't want that to happen.
502, John. So are you staying home or coming here? And I believe at this point he's going to the bar. Karen, waiting to see what you end up doing. I don't want to hang out at the house too much, like I said. So at this point he's at the house. 504, Karen, I think it's clear me around with the kids around is slowly killing our relationship, and our relationship is much more important to me. How about that, Dr. Carol Lieberman?
Yes, that's a no winner. I mean, she's trying to get more of his attention. She doesn't want him giving so much attention to the kids. She wants more of that attention. And, he loves the kids. And so that is not a winner. That is always something that's going to be, it's interesting because they've been dating for 2 years. And so this wasn't a problem or as much of a problem earlier on, but apparently now she wants more and more of his attention, or he's giving more of it to the kids. But that's not going to go over. There's no way, that's not going to endear herself to him.
January 28th, 7:41 now. We jump ahead a little while. John, we are heading to McCarthy's, which is the bar in downtown Canton. Karen, okay. Let me know if you end up leaving. John, why? Now you're not coming? Karen, I'm waiting for the plumber. I actually think he's in the driveway. 7:42. 7:43, John, we're taking Mike's car, so I'm relying on you for a ride home if he leaves. Then I want to read one more. At 8:32, Karen, I'd like to know if I can take a hot shower here if I need to. John, figured you'd be in Canton till Monday. John, I'm getting off my phone. Let me know what you're doing. 8:33, Karen, I think the four of us together is toxic to this relationship. Would like to limit it. What do you think of that, Dr. Janie Lacey?
Yep, I'm hearing that control and I'm hearing that competition with the children, because if she's making it about the children, and this is a father who's trying to do his best job and he loves his children, the best thing that she can do is try to create a cohesive, calm, peaceful place as she really wanted the relationship. So I'm hearing manipulation. I'm hearing a lot of confusion. So I'm hearing her making all these types of decisions, and it sounds like he's getting confused because there's some level of her trying to manipulate a situation to be alone with him and get away from the children, which in this situation was probably not in her best interest, especially if this is a father who deeply loves his children and she's coming into their life. The best bet would have been to embrace that versus try to create this competitive competition, me or them dynamic, especially for this father.
So these are all the back and forth leading up to when they're at the bar together. And Dr. Carol Lieberman, we've been watching this video of them at the bar, and there seems to be no indication of any problems. Like, she walks into C.F. McCarthy's, he puts his arm around her, she's smiling. They both seem happy, comfortable with each other. What should we make of that? The fact that when we here comes Karen. She's walking in. John sees her, comes over, get a drink, put my arm around your back. It doesn't seem like there's that tension that we're sensing in the text messages.
Well, I think that they're both trying to, hoping that maybe they could just put some of those arguments aside and try to make the best of it, hoping that it'll be different, when really it isn't different. And the kids aren't his biological children, right? They're his sister's children, and she died, and he adopted them or became their guardian. So he has a special connection to them, that he went out of his way to take care of them. So I think, they're hoping, somehow this is going to work out, or at least she is, and it's just a temporary kind of lull in the problems.
All right, so these are all the text messages leading up to when they eventually leave the bar and take that drive over to Brian Albert's home. Our experts are going to stay with us. We're going to take a look at some of the communications after Karen leaves and John gets out of the car. What can we read into that? We'll do that, plus coming up next hour.
We're heading back to the low country of South Carolina as the Murdochs are back in the news. Alex's son Buster has filed a bold lawsuit alleging he's been defamed by Netflix and others. What will this new case reveal about justice in the low country?
Wednesday.
The ultimate betrayals.
Back-to-back episodes of Accomplice to Murder.
The spell was broken when the handcuffs went click. Friends and family turning on each other.
What he was willing to do for $1 million.
But just who is the puppet?
She was a master manipulator.
And who's pulling the strings?
An Accomplice to Murder marathon. Starting Wednesday, noon, 11 Central.
Only on Court TV.
Prior to those 4:45 a.m. phone calls, were there other phone calls that the defendant placed?
Yes.
And to whom did she place those calls and about what time?
Starting at 12:33 a.m. to 6:03 a.m., there were 53 phone calls from Ms. Reed to a phone number associated with John O'Keefe.
And in addition to those phone calls to Mr. O'Keefe's phone, what, if any, other calls did the defendant make prior to those 4:45 a.m. calls?
There were phone calls to her family members, to Jennifer McCabe, Kerry Roberts, the Camaranos.
Okay, what's going on here? 54 calls to John O'Keefe starting at 12:33 a.m. Now, according to the prosecution, I believe that's going to be right after this alleged murder. She's calling him 54 times. What does that mean? Let me bring back in my experts, Dr. Carol Lieberman, Dr. Janie Lacey, still with me. Dr. Janie Lacey, what do you think is going on here? Now, there's different ways to look at this. Either she's committing the murder or she just dropped him off. So let's start with committing a murder and calling 54 times right afterwards. What does that tell you?
Well, if we go with that theory of committing the murder, then potentially there's a look to try to make it look a certain way, that she was trying to reach him and she couldn't reach him, so she's in some type of panic mode. And we can also look at that from the other side. If she really didn't know where he was or what happened, then the control of this compulsivity and this call bombing, as far as calling back to back to back, which we have seen in toxic relationships where when you're not answering, there's this panic, there's potential abandonment that's happening, and then there's this back to back calling when the person's not even answering. So if we look at it both ways, there's probably some sense of panic. It just depends on what the intention was.
Yeah, Dr. Carol Lieberman, your thoughts about the number of calls here, and the timing is crucial, because this is right after, like moments after prosecutors say she committed this murder. She's making a series of these calls to the man that she allegedly just killed.
Well, they were drinking, presumably, in this bar. I mean, they know, actually, that was reported, that they were drinking. And so when she allegedly ran him over, she might not have been in a state where she was so rageful, so angry that he was abandoning her. I think abandonment is a big part of this. She may well have some borderline personality traits where abandonment is the big issue. But she might not have known, I don't think that she purposely ran him over. She was rageful. Rage for the abandonment plus alcohol equals running him over. So she might not have been sure what happened to him. In other words, whether he died, whether he went into the party, whether he's off with another woman. And she's still trying to reach him. She still wants to reach him, just like she in her previous messages. But now it's up a notch.
Now let's talk about what's happening now. A little bit later, 12:55 a.m. She is back at his place, right? We know that that's where she went. Karen, I'm going home. 12:55. Karen, see you later. 1:02. Karen, your kids are bleeping alone. And then at 1:04, she says, I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone. Well, I don't think it's that quick of a drive, but maybe it is. But she's not back in Mansfield, and the kids aren't alone. But these are the text messages she's sending. What does this tell you, Dr. Janie Lacey? Would someone who just committed a murder, which is what the allegation is here, now start sending these types of text messages?
Well, when we look at the allegations and then we compare it to the relationship dynamic when we listen to the text messages earlier, to me, they're also in alignment of that as far as potential manipulation, right? Saying one thing but knowing the truth is another to try to provoke some type of response out of the person. So whether there was the intentionality of her murdering or hurting him, or her really not knowing what was going on, and then with the influence of alcohol and being late and all these types of things, I still hear that thread of manipulation and trying to get some type of response based off of the text messages that we heard earlier, that they were still in alignment with that type of thread that I was listening to.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, and the tone of these text messages, she uses some salty language. If you know you just murdered someone, why would you send text messages like this? Because these don't really cover your tracks at all. Like if you're committing murder and you want to cover your tracks, it might be, hey, hon, are you having fun at the party? Things like that. You wouldn't turn it this way, would you? If you're trying to cover your tracks of a murder that you just committed?
Well, except for the idea just in general that, I'm still able to communicate with you because you're not dead. But it is just an escalation of, it's trying to get a reaction from him, like, your kids are alone. I mean, that, you would hope, or she was hoping perhaps that he would, finally answer her, like he stopped answering her. And so, she's using the kids, thinking that, well, if he thinks the kids are alone, surely he's going to call me back. I think she was filled with rage. She was confused. She was drunk. She was desperate. And I think unconsciously, let me make it clearer, I think unconsciously, in a way, she did want him dead. She was so furious at him. And she ended up, allegedly, backing into him and killing him, not necessarily purposely, but unconsciously doing what she kind of wanted to do because she was so angry that he was abandoning her, that he was breaking up with her.
Now, we know prosecutors are getting ready to finish their case later this week, but there was something in the Commonwealth's statement of the case that caught our attention. We didn't hear anything about it in the opening statement, but we're wondering if perhaps we hear it at the end of their case. Let me put this up on the screen because this is, and I want your take on this. The troopers recovered several voicemails from the victim's phone, John O'Keefe's phone. And these are voicemails from the defendant, Karen Read, following the time period they were in front of the residence at 34 Fairview. This would be after the alleged murder, in which the defendant screamed to the victim that she hated him. She's leaving a voicemail for John O'Keefe, allegedly saying, I hate you, moments after committing the murder. according to the Commonwealth. What does that mean, Dr. Janie Lacey? To me, I'm trying to understand. To me, it doesn't equal murder. Like, a murderer doesn't kill their victim and then call the victim's phone and say, I hate you. Why would you do that?
Well, in these cases, when someone is completely feeling abandoned and her out of control actions, it's very common with working with couples where we see one screaming at the other, I hate you, and because of all the stuff that's happening inside of her at this time. And, you know, it depends, right? So when we look at these situations, if we make some assumptions that in her rage and in her cloudiness and her not necessarily thinking straight because of her high reactivity, all these other types of things, there could be a potential that, like my colleague mentioned, that she could have not known what was going on. And this is what we're seeing, because to your point, there's out of order of what someone would normally do. But in this case, we're looking at all the different factors, a toxic relationship, potentially her mental health issues that someone would have to look at what was there before and how did she behave in previous relationships. But when people are out of control, it's not uncommon, in particular for women or men, to have revenge fantasies. You know, as my colleague was mentioning, unconsciously, that they want to hurt the other person. They want the other person to feel their pain because you're leaving me, you're hurting me, and they're acting irrational in these situations. And sometimes when they look back and they don't even remember certain parts of it when they're in our offices.
So, Dr. Carol Lieberman, what do you think a jury of 12 is going to think if they hear this voicemail? The allegations that have been put in front of them is that Karen Read just murdered her boyfriend because of their soured relationship, and then after committing the murder, goes on the phone, calls him up and says, I hate you. Do you believe that they're going to think this is like evidence of her guilt or evidence of her not having killed John O'Keefe?
I think it's like an exclamation point. You know, if we were watching this in a movie and we saw her back up into him and we knew already from the previous messages and so on and the relationship how angry she was at him, this would be the exclamation point, the final point, you know, the end of the sentence kind of thing, that, you know, like sometimes people do say that. You know, let's say people arguing on both sides of a door. You slam a door when you're arguing with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you yell things through the door. I mean, I think they're going to think, well, that's it. That's the final statement that she did kill him.
Now, was there a motive to do all of this? I want to go back to Aruba and the testimony from Marietta Sullivan, one of the Sullivan sisters, who seemed to be the focal point of Karen Read's issues with John O'Keefe on that trip down to Aruba. Let's take a listen.
After Mr. O'Keefe said, calm down, that's Laura's little sister, I said, hi, nice to meet you. That's when Miss Read's head snapped up, and she very loudly told me to go myself across the lobby. And I said, yeah, you too, and walked away. I went straight up to my older sister, Laura, who was out to dinner with the couple the night before. I went up to her and I looked at her and I said, John O'Keefe's girlfriend? And she looked at me and said, Karen? And I said, yeah, you guys like her? She said, yeah, she's okay. And I said, well, she sucks. So my sister pulled me aside from everybody and asked if the night that I got into the altercation with Miss Read in the lobby, if I was making out with Mr. O'Keefe.
How did you respond?
That I absolutely was not.
Okay, so taking all of this, the communications that day, do you think there was some level of motive in this case? I'll begin with you, Dr. Janie Lacey.
Well, when we hear that there was some trust issues, there were some accusations, there was probably some jealousy, right? We can make sense, if we really wanted to, that she was hurt, and in that hurt, what was her actions, and what truly was she aware that she was doing? Was there an accident, or was there truly some intentionality? But we hear that continuous theme of that toxic relationship that was getting elevated and elevated, especially if there was trust issues and accusations, and the continuation of what we heard through those text messages. So can a jury hear potential motive? Absolutely. But could that have been the case? It may not have been the case either, because we also know with toxic relationships, there's lots of different moving parts that can be escalated. It just doesn't necessarily end up with someone being deceased.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, we have about 15 seconds. Your final thoughts on motive here.
Sure. I think what we're looking at is a relationship that's been falling apart that was great perhaps in the first year and maybe even somewhat into the second year, but it was falling apart. And as it was falling apart, Karen Read just lost it. You know, she just, the more he was leaving her, not answering her and so on, the more she just fell apart and got rageful and add a little alcohol to that and you have these results.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, Dr. Janie Lacey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you again really, really soon. When we come back, we're going to revisit the crime scene through the crime scene photos, which are in evidence in this case. We'll bring in our expert. We'll break it down. We'll be right back.
I learned from Sanjay Buchanan that Mr. O'Keefe was found in an area between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. There were 7 members. Most, if not all, had typical snow shovels, and they used those shovels to systematically go through the snowbank that was in front of 34 Fairview within these 2 parameters. There were 2 items specifically. We were looking for potential pieces of a taillight of a vehicle and a shoe.
Welcome back. We're revisiting the scene of John O'Keefe's death, and we're taking a look at the evidence. And this is significant. These photos the jury will have inside the jury room. So when it's time for them to make a decision, they'll be able to go through these multiple photos one at a time, trying to figure out if either story from either side makes any sense here. We're going to try to do that with our special guest joining us, Kenneth Gray, retired FBI special agent, senior lecturer at the University of New Haven, joining us. Kenneth, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. So I want to put up on the screen some of these photos, exhibits that the jury will have when it's time for them to make their decision, to get your take, what you think is significant, and the story that some of these images tell. Let's begin with the first one, and we've got some taillight pieces here from different distances. And in this case, are you bothered by the fact that these taillight pieces weren't found quickly and initially and took place over the course of days, and you know, it wasn't all done when John O'Keefe was first found, like that first day?
So Vinny, here's the thing, is that these officers were working in very difficult conditions. There had been a snowstorm here, everything was covered over with snow, and so the fact that these pieces of taillight were being found days later is somewhat bothersome, but at the same time, it's understandable considering the conditions that the officers were working in. The thing is that once you leave a crime scene, once you clear the crime scene, it's possible for somebody to seed back in pieces of evidence or take away pieces of evidence. So the fact that these pieces of evidence were found after this crime scene was released is somewhat bothersome to me, but it's understandable considering the amount of snow.
Now, we heard from the expert, the accident reconstructionist from the Massachusetts State Police, the trooper who testified, and he testified that it was the arm that was struck by the taillight, and it was the taillight pieces that punctured his sweatshirt, caused those scrapes, those cuts on his arm. Should there be blood on some of these pieces of taillight somewhere?
So the question is not blood, but DNA. Was there DNA from John O'Keefe on these pieces
But
of
how about the
taillight?
blood if his skin is actually punctured? Would you be bothered by the fact that we're not seeing pieces of this taillight either still on Karen Read's car or in the snow with DNA from blood?
Yeah, the blood was coming out of his arm, but has to go through clothing to get onto that tail light. So it really depends upon how violent a strike this was. Now, they're saying he was thrown, what, 30 feet?
30 feet.
30 feet. So you would think that that blood should be present, but at the same time, not every piece of plastic from this tail light may have had blood on it.
Now, let's take a look. We also have John O'Keefe's shoe that was found in the snow by the curb. We have some clear images of that now as well as we take a look. So here, what they're saying is the shoe is buried by the snow. Looking at these evidence photos, is there any way to ascertain, any way to understand or be sure if the shoe came off of John O'Keefe when he's struck by the car, or a shoe is placed there after the fact?
I don't think from these photographs you can make a determination one way or another.
Let's take a, I want you to take a listen. We have Trooper Joe Paul giving his analysis of what happened. I want you to take a listen and get your reaction.
So the vehicle was traveling in reverse.
And how fast was the vehicle traveling and over what distance?
The vehicle traveled up to 24 miles per hour and approximately 62 feet.
What, if anything, occurred then?
The right rear of the Lexus struck the pedestrian John O'Keefe.
And post-collision, what, if anything, occurred with regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
Mr. O'Keefe was projected forward and to the left along the front yard of 34 Fairview Road.
Okay, is that enough detail from your perspective coming from an expert to describe how someone is struck and killed?
So I've never done an accident reconstruction, so I can't say for sure exactly how he came up with these details. I know that defense raised a question about whether he pirouetted in the air, whether he was spun around, or whether he was hit directly and went 30 feet, or if it was a glancing blow that projected him this 30 feet. But I think that the trooper in this case is trying to use the reconstruction, the accident reconstruction, to try to recreate this accident. But I don't think he has enough information to be able to say this.
Yeah, it fell a little short from my perspective as well. We'll see what the defense experts say. Our expert, Kenneth Gray, great to have you. Thank you so much.